I think what is interesting about the hotel business also, though, is you can start as the guy that washed dishes and you can end up running the hotel. There are not a lot of industries where that is still the case, where a true meritocracy exists. And learning department by department, you can be elevated into the point where you're actually running the hotel. And you see that quite often in our business. I think that's really unique.
I'm here with my friend Dupree from Woodbine Development Corporation. I went to grad school together and here to learn about real estate. So I'm really excited to have you, Dupree, to have a conversation.
Let's go, man. I'm glad to be here. It's going to be fun.
All right. And, I was with you last time in Dallas, Fort Worth. And while I was there, I got a hat and I'm really excited. I'm really excited to be wearing it on today.
That's pretty good, man. I like it. That's a real one, actually.
I know. I remember you took it and you're like, we're like, I think that's a cattleman's grip. Is that correct?
You're pretty close. Yeah, cattleman's crown is what they typically call it. That's actually a specific type of crown, but we're going to call it cattleman's for this one.
Okay, got it. And the thing that I didn't buy, right, is this what is that called? They had really fancy ones. They had $200. What are these?
That's your hat band. That's right.
It's a hat band, right? So, and I felt like I don't need a hat band, and now I'm like, I think I need a hat band, right?
Well,
I don't feel like totally complete.
That's pretty good though. The brim you have. I mean, they all specialize, but that's called a J.B. Mooney brim, which is a specific bull rider, which would be appropriate for where you got it. But you can go as long as you want on hats. The types, the brands, the felt, the straw, the shape, all those things. It's kind of a fun extension of who you are.
I want to know. So I lived in Austin, Texas for a while. I had a black beaver hat. This was I interned in college at this company called Trilogy. And the thing is, we had to throw it out because it took up so much room. And we were moving all over the place. And I wasn't wearing it for 20 years. And then I came back and now I got this one and I wear this one. I wear this one out in the backyard where I'm gardening. This is my gardening hat.
Oh boy. Well, that's okay. You got to wear it for whatever you want. That's good. If you threw out a beaver hat, that's also a problem, but we're going to ignore that for now because if it was 100% beaver, that's an heirloom that should have been passed on to your kids. But never mind that. You'll get another one when you come back to Texas and we'll make it happen.
Okay. I'm sorry. I got to know about hats. All right. Tell me about beaver hat versus, is this a straw hat?
Yeah, that's a straw. Straw you wear in the summer after Labor Day generally, although the rules have kind of been thrown out for the most part. But there's a couple things you have to know. Felts in the winter, straws in the summer. When you set a hat down, you always set it upside down on the crown. So it should be setting on the table like this. When you take a hat off, you should grab it by the crown, not by the brim, because then it adjusts the shape that you've created. You're okay to wear it inside a restaurant or those types of things, but whenever you meet a lady, you take it off. If ever you walk in a church, you take it off. When you eat, generally you take it off. Not standard rule, that doesn't always happen, but usually I'll wear it into the restaurant, and then once I sit, then I'll take it off. So there's a whole thing. It's kind of a cowboy culture that I try to still adhere to. It's a little old school stuff that we like around here.
That's awesome. I definitely want to learn this. And they taught me that. They're like, you got to put it upside down. I think I dented mine. I don't know if I can I got to steam it out. I think I got a dent in mine.
Straw's a little harder, but you can.
Nice. Thank you so much. Sorry, I got to ask one last question. Where do you put your hat when you sit down?
All right. Well, the straw hats are not very fragile. So I put it upside down under the seat I'm eating in. And I've never left a hat, so it hadn't been a problem for me. And then, but the hard part is flying. And so I fly with a hat that's usually stiffer, even when I fly with my felts, because they're just not as fragile. And then I can either have it in my lap or I can have it under the seat or whatever. But they're not. I've been doing that for 15 years now, so it doesn't really bother me. But if you haven't, it's a huge nuisance to carry a giant dish around with you while you're traveling.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny because I got my felt hat in the winter in Austin, so that totally makes sense. Yes.
There you go.
It's very, they're everywhere. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'd love to learn just about, and I'd love to wear this hat. Actually, it's growing on me.
Let's do it.
Uh, but we're so different. Like I'm from Toronto, Canada. I'm now a dual citizen, U.S. Canadian. I'm in tech. I've always been in tech. This real estate thing, I'm so curious because like everyone in tech wants to own real estate, right? They're like, how do I have this like cash flowing asset? Like it's just incredible because everyone here is just about like, it's capital gains and it's like
Right.
stock.
Right.
What is it like sort of growing up, in sort of like the real estate business and just sort of like hospitality and what is that just like, what is that like?
Man, interesting. I think we all grew up in our own silos, and mine was no different. My dad was in the real estate business, and so that's kind of what I knew. But I wouldn't say I was studied in the business. It was just who we were around, and the people that were in the industry was who I knew. And so when I got to college, honestly, I was like, well, I didn't know what else there was. I didn't know there was consulting. I didn't know there was tech. I didn't know accounting was an option. It was more like I just knew this is what everybody around our family did, so this is what I'm going to do. It was in real estate. So it is interesting how that is that probably whatever we end up growing up with and the people that we associate with kind of conditions us to do a certain thing. But in my case, it turned out to be, especially when it comes to hospitality, it ended up being something that's very personal to me, and that really was kind of an extension of what I think I was kind of born to do. And so from that standpoint, if you just think about what hospitality is, it is generally anticipating something before they arrive, right? Anticipating what you need before you get here. And really, there's not, at least in my view, there's not a lot that makes someone feel more cared for when that's the case. Even if it's somebody staying at your house, and you can say, well, I know they like grilled cheese and tomato soup, and so you make that meal for them, or whatever it would be, if it's fried chicken or if it's spaghetti or if it's steak or whatnot. That's knowing that, okay, that's the dish he appreciates, or she appreciates, and so I'm going to anticipate that and provide that for them. And so for me, when growing up in the hotel business and kind of learning about it and kind of going back a house with my dad and walking through the kitchens, and my first job was a dishwasher. That was kind of when it became less about a building, a really cool building where you stay for 2 or 3 nights, and it became more about an operating business. It became more about where people are serving other people. And so, again, it was like less about where you stay and more about a people who serve. And so that resonated with me probably more than I really realized at the time until later on when I kind of began to get in this business more formally. And that's when I was like, oh, those are the things that I love. That's what makes me so passionate about this. And so it is, I mean, hotels are fun. They're hard. But you kind of talk to, any of that. I mean, we have a lot of the family offices that invest alongside our family, and the consistent theme, right, in wealth building and wealth generation, not always, not perfect, but generally begins with real estate, or with buying and acquiring real estate with proceeds from whatever the operating business was, and using that as a tax strategy or using that as a wealth generation tool. And so from that standpoint, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, I kind of lucked into it. Is kind of how I got there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that it's funny because like in Silicon Valley, all your risk is concentrated, right? As sort of like a business builder, you're right, because you're like, I believe in this future, and you could do it. You could be in it for like 10 years, and you have one bad year, and it's all over, and or you have one good year, and it's like it's transformational.
Right, right. I think
Yeah,
that's
it's just a gamblers over here. And in terms of real estate, it's funny because like me and like a number of sort of tech folks were kind of like, what would it look like to be in commercial real estate? It's like, oh, you know what? Like we'll like buy like a doctor's office and we'll rent it and we'll lease it, and and it's like, how do we do this? And like, can we like find the broker and then the lawyers? And it's just like, if you can't, you have to like assemble this all from scratch.
It is interesting. I think the interesting thing about it, Ian, is I agree with all that. It is nuanced. But once you peel the layer back, the biggest, or the worst kept secret is it's not that hard in our business. I mean, if you can buy an asset for a good price and you understand what the future cash flows are, generally you're in a pretty safe position. Of course, even better if you can pay cash and you don't have debt. And if you're aligned with partners who can think about it the same way you do, like, okay, we're trying to create value here, so we're going to fix it and flip it, or hey, we don't care. We're literally long term. We're just counting on value appreciation. And that's why you kind of see some of that incremental steps that folks will take when they're getting into real estate. Okay, I'm going to buy a house. Now I'm going to buy a duplex. Now I'm going to buy a fourplex. Now I'm going to buy a little small apartment building and so forth and so on. And then they kind of scale up from there. I think that's the interesting thing about real estate. Capital is clearly a giant hurdle, and it is a barrier to entry. But to the extent that can be surpassed, it really does. Just about anybody can do it, because at this point, with what's available to be able to kind of educate us and go through the feasibility that you would need to do, you don't have to have a real estate degree to do it. You kind of never really did, but now it's a lot easier.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I feel like there's, looking at businesses, right? There's like there's finance people, right? And like finance hasn't really changed in 30 years. It's like Excel and models and things like that. And real estate, I don't know if there's that much change. I'd love to learn more about it. Software is completely different, right? Like software only lasts like 9 months and the next version is going to come out and it's more competitive. And now like AI is going to take all the jobs. Like you don't even need to like, the whole reason I'm in software is because like I wanted to be an artist. My dad's like, no, you need a job. So like literally he just like noped my, like, I wanted to go to USC and do film. And he's like, nope, you're going to be an engineer. I'm like, okay, I'll do that.
Well, worked out well for you. Uh, I'm glad you did it. The world is better for it. But it's interesting. I kind of joke about hotels. The nothing has changed about hotels, in like fundamentally, right? I mean, like Mary and Joseph were looking for a place to stay, and had the same kind of experience that if they had TripAdvisor, they would have ranked it a certain way. And that still is really consistent today. Of course, the operating model, all these other things have changed. There's a lot of ways to innovate, but around the edges. But at the end of the day, it's still a pretty simple thing. Can I provide a place for you to enjoy where you sleep and bathe, and then leave, and be served in the interim in ways that make you feel appreciated and I guess and special. And so that fundamentally hasn't changed. A lot of other product types have, or in some ways haven't, but at least in hospitality, it's a pretty consistent delivery since the beginning of time.
Okay, now I'm really excited. I want to figure out like, okay, how do we do this? So like other folks that are kind of coming from like the Californians that kind of come to Texas and they're like, I want to do real estate, and they get a straw hat and
Oh man. Yes, sure, 100% yes. I think what is so I mean, okay, so I don't you'll have to think, like, help me think of the parallel in the tech industry. But so everybody has stayed in a hotel. I mean, at some level, presumably, and many of business travelers many times have stayed in a hotel. And so that makes you an expert in hotels, because you have stayed in a hotel 100 times. And now you know what the light should be like, and you know what the mattress should be like, and you know what your sheets should be like. You know what pillow you want. You don't like this type of shower head. You like that type of shower head. You want it to have a door. You want it to be a sliding door. You don't want it to have a sliding door. All these things that kind of make up a hotel. What happens is now you say, oh, you know what? Eventually it's like, hey, I got enough money. I want to make my own hotel. And so now this always happens where there's some form of wealth creation, or maybe involved in some other kind of real estate project, or I've seen it in the tech business 100 times, where guys are like, we're going to do the nicest hotel ever, and it's all tailored and built towards their needs and what their personal preferences are. And lo and behold, that doesn't appeal to a wider demographic, and maybe it's not as successful as it could be. There's instances where it is, and it has worked. But generally what I see most often is folks that get into the hotel business who have not done it before make a series of the same mistakes. And usually that is what type of brand. It's not always location, because most of the time location actually they'll get right. Although there are definitely many instances where I've seen folks saying, we're going to do a hotel, 100 miles outside of San Jose in the middle of nowhere. Like, that's going to work? No, it's not going to work. But we see oftentimes, and I always communicate that a lot of the value, at least in our business, is created well before the hotel is developed. It's in the choice of brand that you're doing. The way you develop the hotel. If you can develop it more efficiently than the next guy can. If you're partnering with a Hyatt or a Hilton or a Marriott, and where in the brand family are you actually going to identify this hotel as? Which flag are you going to use? And what contracts do you have negotiated with that hotel? Are they going to operate, or is somebody else going to operate? All those factors are really where a lion's share of the value is created well before the project is developed. And most oftentimes, those who don't know that in the business, the brands love when they can sign a franchise deal with somebody who's never done a hotel before, because they know they're going to fleece the heck out of them. I mean, so that's kind of what happens. I don't want to say that they're predatory necessarily, but the terms get much more favorable the fewer hotels you have done.
Yeah, I think the analogy in the tech industry is people like create a startup in a market that's not very big, and they have like 50% share and they can't grow anymore. And they've spent, just like 5, 10 years in this thing, and it's a little bit of a cul-de-sac. So I think that, yeah, that first time, and I think when you're building a company, there's like 10,000 ways to die. And, the difference between having a good partner, you can like eliminate 9,000 ways to die. Still have 1,000 ways to die, right? But like at least you have a better shot. And in the Silicon Valley, I think it's your investors and it's your peers and it's your friends that all kind of like, we're all kind of going through the same thing and having the same problems. And your lawyers are actually pretty good. They've seen a lot of things. And you bring on a team that's sort of done it before.
Yes.
Well, and here, I don't know, geographically, it's very open to like the service providers and things. And then like, once you have a little bit of product market fit, everyone sort of helps everybody. That's like I think the SF Bay Area culture. What's it like in real estate and in like your part of the world? Is it is it sort of, you got to be there a while? Like,
That's a great question. Generally, I think it's also regionally, like what's the DNA and culture of the city that you're in or from. Texas, like the state motto is friendship, right? So there's a courteousness and a kindness that I think exists just in the state. And then depending on the city you're in, of course, that changes as well. Where I'm in Dallas, and Dallas kind of lives and breathes the language of and speaks the language of commerce. And so generally, this is a place where we want to see other businesses succeed. And so although it is literally the most competitive real estate market in the country, there's a unwritten rule that permeates the business, which says if a young person calls you about getting into the industry, then you must take the call. You make time for them. You help connect them. You do. I mean, it's just kind of the pay it forward type of strategy. And generally, you are wanting to see people succeed in other categories, particularly when it's one that doesn't compete with you. But naturally, there are swim lanes, right? And so it's a lot easier for me to support and help industrial, logistics, office, retail, or multifamily guys. But at the same time, I'm not afraid to help and at least compare notes and kind of have that professional, I guess, peer sharing that goes on with other hotel folks for sure. That's kind of a key part of our business. But there's always overlap. If we're in a specific type of hotel, and hotel operator B or C are also in a specific type of hotel, there's going to be overlap. It's just handling those, I think with caution. But it is definitely one of those industries where it is all about how you support other folks, how you kind of come alongside each other together, especially for those folks who are kind of growing a new business. You really kind of, it is a bit of a community in that way.
Very cool. And just kind of curious, like from that sort of MBA perspective, like what are the like dynamics of hotel? Like what is the, capacity you have to be at? How do you think about like, cash flows, over time? Like what's the structure of these sort of investments?
All right. So there's a lot there, but I'm going to try to like make it really, I'll try to like break it down as much as possible so even a tech guy can understand.
Yay.
So when you identify a site and you say, I'm going to build a hotel here, let's just go there first. The first thing you're really trying to do is get a sense for what type of brand are you doing. Are you doing what's called a select service hotel? Or are you doing a full service hotel? Select service hotel, think Courtyard, Hilton Garden Inn, Hyatt Place, those types of hotels. When you think of full service hotels, think of Marriott, Hilton, and Hyatt. Now, between those 6 brands that I mentioned, right, there's 100 in the middle, and there's 100 on the other side, and then there's 100 on the other side. So some that are economy all the way to the left, and some that are high-end luxury, right, on the far right. Four Seasons, Auberge, Ritz, all those types of things. So we play generally in between those 2 goalposts that I mentioned. And when we are looking at hotel, it all starts with the budget. What does the market support? So the data within the hotel business is it's incredible, and there's more data I think in our business than just about any real estate business, which, so for the tech guys out there, they're trying to figure out, okay, that's something that could be capitalized on, by the way. But really, you're going to start there and you say, okay, based on the rates that this market is offering, what kind of hotel can I build? And if it's a market that's capping out at $150 a night, then I'm not going to be able to do a full service hotel. If it's a night that's got, well, hey, 10 hotels are doing $350, $450, $550 a night, then I'm going to look at doing a full service hotel, something that can support a much higher rate. Now, I need a much higher room night rate, obviously, to be able to support a higher construction cost, because it's much more expensive to build a full service hotel. Now, once I have that category checked, then I'm going to say, what brand makes the most sense? I evaluate the market and I say, well, there's 10 Hyatts, there's 2 Hiltons, there's 15 Marriotts. And then you say, okay, what brand is not available within those 3 major flags? And then I'm going to say, okay, I like this full service hotel, but I need to create a competition between Hyatt and Hilton, because those two have the least amount of hotels in this market. I'm just kind of oversimplifying it. And then you begin to land on the right hotel. And when we think about structure, a full service hotel is generally going to have a NOI margin, kind of an income margin in the kind of 25% range. So however that would kind of compare to your business, whereas a select service hotel may have a margin of somewhere between 35 and sometimes even as high as 45% NOI margin. So you begin to see how compelling each business model is, because a select service hotel has select services. It doesn't have the same personnel count. It doesn't have the same number of front desk agents. It doesn't have 24-hour room service. It can run much more efficient, but naturally its rate is capped. You can't charge as much. And so when we think about the hotel business and we're evaluating all these different sites, we're really looking at it in that way. What does this site yield? What does the market yield? You kind of, to use a football analogy, we just say, like, you kind of take what the defense gives you. In this case, that's how we evaluate it.
Oh, it's awesome. So on that NOI, that's your sort of net income?
Yes, net operating income. That's kind of how we define it.
Okay, got it. And then you got sort of like this 20, 25, 35, which is, and then what's that? What are the assumptions there? Like, what capacity do you have to hit for a select versus a full service for those margins?
It's not a great rule of thumb, but generally you have to have occupancy of greater than 65% to be able to make money, right? Because you're going to leverage. So it's a $100 million hotel. You're usually going to get about $65 million of debt, 65%. You're going to have to capitalize the balance with pure equity. And so from that standpoint, right, when debt becomes more expensive, right, it makes the overall project, it has to have a higher hurdle of performance in order to solve for that higher cost of capital that you're now incurring. And of course, the other end of that makes it a lot harder, because if I'm doing, it's a people business, that is the hardest part of it. And so my operator needs to have the skill to hire the right talent. And as you know, like, that is really hard to find great people, and it's expensive, and it's increasingly getting even more expensive. And so the cost side of our business becomes more and more challenging. And so I'm not a fatalist necessarily. I think the business is still obviously got a bright future. But the fact is, like, the data will all convince me anyway, that those margins are going to continue to shrink and continue to shrink unless there is, like, legitimate innovation that really replaces some of the largest cost centers. So, you could imagine what that would be: robotic room cleaning, things like that, where it becomes much more efficient, much more effective, can work 24 hours a day, doesn't need breaks, is not subject to, lawsuits, things like that. I mean, like, that is a real place where innovation will eventually solve a giant category within a cost category within the hotel business. And beyond that, you can kind of think of 100 more. But those are the things that become really, really challenging for our business that I think are going to have to be solved, because eventually those margins will erode to the point where it's like, well, how do you make a hotel work?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, I go to Japan a few times, and like the level of automation there is sort of like next level, right? Like, there's not even people take your order at like a, sort of fast casual restaurant. You have to use a QR code, and then like it just comes to your table off of like what you tap.
It is interesting, right? It kind of that communicates a few things to me. I do think at some level, I don't know what that is, where that silo exists necessarily, but I do think it will create a premium for human interaction at some level, right? Not across the spectrum, because there are certain offerings, particularly in select service, where if I'm a business traveler, in some ways you don't even want human interaction. You just want to get to your room, know that it's perfectly the way you need it to get, and the way it's supposed to be. You check out without any hassle, with nobody asking you 10 questions and trying to get your email and this and that and the other. It's like, boom, that's all I need. I am here for a moment and I'm gone. And that's where kind of the automation that you described is likely going to take over that side of the business. But then on the other end of it, right, traveling for leisure or paying $1,500 a night, you are going to expect that someone knocks on your door to grab your suit, to be able to press it, to have it back to you before your morning meeting, and then sees that when you're in the bar, you're drinking a certain type of drink. So when you show up the next day, without asking, that drink is served to you. Like, those are the types of things that I think that human interaction, that hospitality instinct causes us to say, now I will go back to that hotel and I will pay that much because of the service and intention that I experienced when I was there.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Yes, it makes sense. I do a lot of I'm in and out for business meetings all the time. All I want in the hotel is a Subway sandwich, like store, right? Because I want a salad, or I want a sandwich, and I want a bag of chips, and I want to keep going, right? Like, I don't want to wait for, like, the food to, yeah. It's like, is there a next gen hotel for, like, so I'll give you the example. I was talking to someone who was doing, I think they were doing, like, they were opening up casinos they had casinos in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And then they opened up a casino in Macau, and they try to build it like Las Vegas with, like, Michelin star restaurants, and it's all fancy. And what they discovered for that culture is all the people wanted to do was gamble and then go to a noodle bar right next to the gambling area and then come back and gamble more. Right. So it's like a cultural thing. So that's like me and a Subway sandwich. Like, that's all I want. It just, because I'm up early, I'm out late.
I don't think you're wrong there. I think those offerings do exist for sure, and I think too, like, if you think about how data could be utilized in the hotel business, right? I mean, theoretically, when you check into a room, right, there's a million things I can learn about you without ever having to have anyone in the room. I can know which pillow you slept on. I know which side of the bed you slept on. I know if you were under 2 blankets or 3. I know, if the temperature was on 65 or 63. I know if you had a Wall Street Journal versus a New York Times versus an LA Times, or in our case, the Dallas Morning News. Like, now that's just like 10 things, right, that I learned just by the way you slept, or by the brief interaction, that never even having to quiz you, I can know. And so that type of profile that could be built and that could be learned, right, which is like, could be really valuable, so that when you come back, when you check in, there's a Subway sandwich, a barbecue chips, a Sprite with your pillow, and the bed is set the certain way you want. I mean, all those things are possible with just the kind of learnings that we can take from your stay. And you would think at this point in our business, we would have found a way to really capitalize on that. And really, we haven't. So if you think about innovation, like, that's where the tech business needs to come into hotels and go, we know how to do that.
Oh my God. That's crazy. Yeah, someone should totally do that. Like, you mentioned, like, okay, there's, like, you have someone who tried your hotel once, right? And then there's a value of lifetime value, like how often do they come back, or do they not come back? How do you sort of, like, what's the value of that? I'm just trying to understand, like, the metrics.
You don't quantify it. I mean, in our business, it's not quantified. It really isn't. I mean, I think that's where part of the opportunity is, but maybe somewhat of an aside. So I build a hotel in the specific location. What the population of that area is, I mean, matters, but it doesn't really matter. I'm not building it for the people who live there. I'm building it for the people who are going to stay there. So it's like an abstract part of data that's hard to quantify. Why is somebody going to... Now, of course, there's a hospital nearby, there's a stadium, there's an airport. Now you can start to quantify incoming demand. You can begin to assess what that will be. But it's less about the lifetime value of that customer. It's more about the sustained demand over time for different segments of travel that I can predict. So whether that, as we mentioned earlier, it's longer term stay for healthcare, or that's business travel because I'm adjacent to an airport, or that's entertainment because I'm next to an arena. Those are the types of things that we use to build a model around who's going to stay at that hotel and what our ability is to push rate.
Very cool. When you think about that that net operating income, and you think about the 100 million, the equity 35 in, like what? How do you think like I is that sort of margin including the interest and the debt payments, or is that
A little bit different. The way we think about a return on equity, I mean, if you're just thinking broad strokes, if I ask you to invest in a hotel with me, and we're going to develop that hotel from the ground up, what I need to provide to you is I need to say we're going to deliver an IRR, an internal rate of return, of somewhere between kind of low 20s and kind of high 20 IRR. That I have to be able to communicate that to you. Otherwise, you're going to say, well, I don't want to take that kind of real estate risk. It's just too much risk. I mean, what if the foundation shifts and something goes wrong with the construction and you run out of metal and now you got to do aluminum? There's a million things that can go wrong in a development project. At the same time, I could say, okay, Ian, we're going to go buy this hotel in Palo Alto and we're going to go fix it. We're going to spend $50 million fixing this hotel. In that sense, it's theoretically a quicker path to profitability. It is slightly lower risk. And so the return that I'm going to give you is going to be probably more in that high teens to low 20s range. And depending on depending on the cool factor of that location, right, it's likely that then I have a higher amount of investors wanting to invest. And so the return threshold that you'll accept is probably lower. Because if I'd said, okay, we bought the Driscoll Hotel in Austin not too long ago, and it was almost all tech guys that invested with me in that project. And I probably could have or should have promised a much lower return because most of those tech guys were like, I don't care. I just want to be in the Driscoll. It's the coolest hotel in Texas. It's the most iconic hotel in Texas. It's been around since the late 1800s. Like, I want to say that I'm owning like one of the most iconic pieces of the state.
when you think about the LP base that you've got, so you've got some, I guess, folks that will sort of invest with you, and then you have folks that and there's funds like REITs and things like that. And when you think about this, do you think about partners, your limited partners being strategic in terms of like the brand, the cachet, the network, that they'll stay there?
For sure.
Or are you like, to what extent do you think about like cost of capital versus like the value of LPs?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's probably where there is a distinct parallel to your industry for sure. But now you'll in the tech side, you'll take on investors because there are strategic relationships that help advance the business. Sometimes that can be the case with hotels because if I'm doing a hotel, like for instance the one in Austin, and I have kind of the who's who of investors there who are invested in the Driscoll with me, well, their Christmas parties are going to be there. They're the guests that come visit their company, they're going to put them there. All those things kind of help build the brand because now you're saying, oh, this is this so-and-so investor who's really important in this way, he's an investor there. Oh, the former governor, he's an investor there. Those types of things like that can kind of build the lore of the hotel. There are occasions where that strategic investor can advance that hotel materially, but it's not usually the case. It's usually one of those things where that investor helps materially move the needle for me to be able to raise more capital within a specific fund. That's a strategic investor that says, hey, this particular family has invested $50 million with us. That means a lot to another family. And say, well, if they're in it, then that's a good reason for me to be in it. So it's probably less so affecting the operations of the hotel, and it's more so helping me to raise capital alongside other families who say, okay, if they're in it, I'm in it. And that's where it kind of creates that momentum for us. So hope that answers your question.
Very cool. So that's the equity piece. And then how does it work? Because like in tech, it's like there are no dividends, right? It's a sort of like you kind of, it's very power law distribution and capital gain centric. What's it like in the hotel business? Dividends? Do you resell secondary?
Yeah, it's amazing. I wish the real estate business was more like that because it would allow us to reinvest in the hotel with more intention. But generally it needs to have a cash flow component to it. And so like any form of real estate, it's not as much in hotels, but I need to be able to have a current cash component that I'm able to distribute to investors. But it's for sure back-ended. There's a cap rate was what we call, which that cap rate, a percentage number is applied to your NOI number. Your NOI is divided by your cap rate, and that gives you a value. And that value is really what we are selling on. And almost, not perfect, but 70% of the value becomes on reversion. And that's what I'm able to then return to investors and then move on to the next project.
Got it. And what's the length of the projects?
Depends. I mean, Woodbine's unique in that way. Most of the folks in our industry are kind of private equity focused, where they're going to be in a project and out of a project in less than 5 years. And our view is a little bit different. We like to have really generally 3 different buckets. One is what we call merchant build, where we're buying or building an asset as quickly as possible, and we are selling it as soon as we're complete. And then there's our fund assets, which have a little bit of a longer life. You're usually buying an asset, you're improving it, you are refinancing it, and then you're selling it. So you can kind of create 2 different pops for your investors. One on the refinance, when you're able to take money out, and then one when you sell. And the third is really legacy hold assets. Those are assets that we just say we're never going to sell. And I think that has really been an important part of our business and how we've kind of defended our balance sheet, how we've kind of buttressed that balance sheet. So from our standpoint, I mean, we didn't always have that mentality, but we've been able to grow the business so methodically over the last 10 years to be able to put ourselves in a position where we can have those 3 different investment outlooks.
What do you think are some of the biggest, right now, like the world is changing, right? And,
Yeah.
manufacturing and tariffs and all these other things, like what are like, when you think about the dynamics here, are there opportunities for hospitality opening up? Like, do you think that, is there a boom coming to some geographical areas? Do you see, demand sort of shifting?
Well, there's a lot there. How would I answer that question? I think I would say, for sure, in certain geographic areas, there is an enormous opportunity, like Texas. For sure, in some geographies, I think hotels, hospitality in general, are in for a world of hurt, like the West Coast, California. Structurally, it obviously is broken in many ways. Governance structure, cost of employment, minimum wage, unions, different things like that. Like it is going to break that system one way or the other. Not every hotel, of course, but in some ways. But when I think about kind of like the future of the hotel business and where it goes, I'll say this about our industry: there have been very few real estate product types in my mind that have seen some form of systemic threat consistently over the last several years. Whether that was, obviously COVID would be on that list. Airbnb would be on that list. Interest rates, which affects every type of real estate, but hotel obviously is a part of that. I mean, that's just 3. I could go like 4 or 5 more. And so I do think there are ways that the hospitality industry is going to continue to see those types of threats. And eventually it's like, maybe people travel less. Maybe they travel less for work and time. Maybe it goes in waves. Maybe it's certain markets. I mean, there's a lot about the hotel business that is really volatile, which makes investing in it really challenging. But it weeds out a lot of that competition and allows us to be able to say, okay, that's a place where we feel like, because of our expertise, we do have some institutional advantages that allow us to see and recognize value when others can't.
And when you think about like the demographic changes, right? Let's say in 10 years, right? So fewer babies being born, maybe that's fewer families. Like the sort of boomer generation, are they vacationing more? Like what are you sort of seeing as the demographic trends maybe 10, 20 years in the hotel business?
Generally, I feel like people are working less, right? Or not working as hard, for sure, right? I mean, this is kind of like the entitlement curse that I think are of the country, different category if we don't want to hit on that. But yeah, so I think leisure grows. I think leisure becomes more a part of what the kind of American mindset is, for better or worse. And that is going to benefit a certain type of hotel. So I think leisure travel, I think the industry in general, we do see some growth there. We do see long-term trends that are like, whoa, that's going to be really interesting on how that begins to manifest. So we'll see.
Very cool. And then just in the hospitality industry, are there sort of like moments that you really kind of remember? So I went to grad school, that I went to graduate school the first time, at a place that had a school for hotel management. And I'm like, there's a school for hotel management? And then I started talking and meeting the hotel people, and they're like, oh, yeah, like, you come out of graduate school and you're managing a multi-million-dollar business, right? As like your first job. And I'm like, wow, like, man, you put it that way, that is kind of incredible. So when you think about like, what are the, and whether it's, yourself or the people in the industry, like what have been some of the sort of the amazing stories about hotels? I don't know if it's like, weddings or, things that happen or natural disasters or like what are some like the sort of bigger stories that people at hotels kind of see that, day to day we don't see quite as much?
Yeah, it's a great question. All right, well, let me take a few themes that I think are unique to the hotel industry. So maybe not quite where you're headed, but let me just add what I think is interesting. While what you described is true, like to go to grad school for a specific profession and be able to run a multi-million-dollar business and really have P&L control, right? That is a unique part about it. I think what is interesting about the hotel business also, though, is you can start as the guy that washed dishes and you can end up running the hotel. There are not a lot of industries where that is still the case, where a true meritocracy exists, and learning department by department, you can be elevated into the point where you're actually running the hotel. And you see that quite often in our business. I think that's really unique. I think when you think about things like COVID and switching gears here, and you think about a hotel, some of the things that still kind of amaze me is that like you think about the issues that we face. Hotels don't have locks on the door, on the front door. There is no lock. So you literally had to figure out like what do we do when we do not have any people in our hotel for us an extended period of time. So in some case, like totally shutting hotels down. Well, we got to figure out how to lock the doors first of all, or we have to put locks on the doors. And so that kind of experience was so harrowing. It was so like jarring for our business that I mean, it left a mark that we still talk about. I was in a meeting today, and one of the questions was, this of course 5 years later, is what did you do during that COVID strategy? What was your break-even mentality? And it's the same story. It's like, well, the GM would check somebody in, and the GM would probably clean a room later that night because so many of the people had to be furloughed that you had the guy from Cornell, making beds. And like that is I don't know that exists in many other industries. So two sides of that spectrum that I think are at least unique.
That is crazy. And so, like, any sort of like happy moments, like things that are just like, so I was talking to someone in the restaurant industry, right? And they're talking about like, these are like the biggest anniversaries, birthdays, like memorable events at like this, kind of restaurant that was, really catering towards sort of those life moments. Like,
Yes, of course. That's probably the best part about hospitality. I mean, you think about let's, go back to the Driscoll for a moment, or I can kind of come up with a few others as well. But I think every Texas governor since 1886 has had a dinner or a ball there. I mean, there's just not many other, like that's just kind of a unique thing, right? I mean, and hotels offer that opportunity for people to come together in those types of special moments. You think about a project we have called Mountain Shadows in Phoenix, which is really cool, kind of boutique resort in Paradise Valley that I did with a partner, a guy named Scott Lyon, and it's kind of developed this reputation as just this really unique little resort right at the base of Camelback, and got a great hike and all these cool things you can do. But there is there's so many professional golfers in Phoenix, and somehow, some way, this game of professional golfers now happens on a weekly basis on our par 3 course, which is just unusual. So you walk in and like all the biggest names in golf now happen to be there, and no one really knows about it. I probably shouldn't put it on this because then people will go, but it is those are the kind of unique things that these types of venues allow you to host and facilitate. And of course, there's other things too. I mean, where like you mentioned, weddings or things like that, really important cultural moments. those types of things can happen at hotels, which is really kind of a fun part of our business. And a lot of times it's not expected. One of the hotels that we have in our portfolio, which is not like it's not like it's the nicest hotel, but almost every important politician goes there. That's where they go. They stay there because they know they've got a side entrance. They can be unnoticed. They go straight to their room. They got that kind of stuff. So, those are just kind of fun parts about our business that are unique. I mean, you don't get that kind of excitement in an office building, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's the there's like, so I go to San Diego Comic-Con every year, and then all the celebrities, they'll end up going to the Hard Rock Cafe, Hard Rock Hotel, because they have secret side entrance, right? It's just like they have that facility.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's kind of fun part. I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but I hope that gives you a little ammunition.
No, perfect. But just one more thing I'm curious about, just when you think about hiring and culture for like this hotel operator, you kind of alluded to a little bit. So what is that person who's going to be, really just the fantastic operator? Like, what are some of the, where do you look for them? What kind of profile? Is it the dishwasher? Is it the Cornell grad? Like, what in your experience have been the top operators?
Well, so I'm going to pivot on that, actually. I'm going to talk less about the operator and more about our development company, because we oversee the operator. And I think that these are things I actually thought we'd talk more about, these kind of things, which I'm glad to talk about, whatever. But that I think does transcend industry. We were hiring for talent for years. And I mean, it was basically like, who is the most capable, the smartest, the most accomplished individual? And we would hire those individuals, and they would work for a while, but then eventually, like, something wasn't fitting. Eventually they'd leave or find a better opportunity, or service for a couple years and then not, or conflict would arise. There'd just be different things where it didn't work out. And we kind of went through that. And my brother and I, who we run the business together, were kind of like something is not right. And so we said, okay, we are going to hire on culture. We're just going to start there. And if they line up with the values that we believe in, we'll make capacity second. We'll make culture first. And so we really started hiring within a specific grid, 5 points to our grid. And we said, okay, we're literally going to grade them when we interview them. How do they line up with those things? And as we started hiring people that lined up with those 5 values, all of a sudden we started seeing longevity. Now, granted, there was transition. It took a little longer to educate, a little more coaching, a lot more teaching, more, much longer ramp up, things like that you didn't see the instant improvement on our P&L, so to speak. But you did see, okay, these are the right people. And now, kind of, let's call it 8 years into that philosophy, now you would look at our team and you say, we have the best team we've ever had. And the answer is simple. It's because we started hiring on culture. And I will say this, from we don't just like set it and forget it. Every single year, I have a grid. We got a matrix, and we rank our entire team. And it's not like 1 through 10. Does Ian value relationships? Is he a hard worker? Is he accountable? Does he have conviction? Is he humble? It's not like scale of 1 to 10. He's a 6 on that one, a 3 on that one, a 5 on that one. It's like, is he a 1? Yes. Or is he a 2? No. If he's a no for 2 consecutive quarters, we got a problem. Like there's a major issue, and inevitably has always worked itself out where we can see that issue long before, that people issue long before we actually have to take action on it, because we're going like, something's not lining up with our culture. And as we've defended that, that's what's really created this place where I think people feel like they belong. They feel purposeful. So from that standpoint, that's what has been probably the key from a hiring standpoint for Woodbine, that has put us in a position to, I think, have some of the success we've had. And by the way, to have the team that can fight the really hard fights when things aren't so good, which is frankly more important.
That's amazing. So when you have this culture, so it sounds like can you give me an example of when you're like, you're pre-filtering for culture. So what's the trade-off of that? Like, is it when you see people, would you just sort of discount people in terms of qualification experience? Like, and how do you measure that, like, up front? Like, is that like, you can't find it really on the resume, or do you find it on the resume?
I think we see, now we've kind of learned some of those tells. And of course, people leave such a large digital footprint that we can see how they think, how they communicate, where their values really are. And I think too, like the hardest one, or maybe not the hardest one, probably the most beneficial one is the humility part, the H of our value system. We call it reach. When we look at humility, it doesn't take long to be able to sit in the room with somebody and understand kind of where they are. And that's just really hard to fake humility. And I think that's usually the one that I kind of really hold on to. If I'm questioning the others, if I see that in a person like that, that feels like where we are. And usually it's just, again, I mean, the culture aspect for us, I wouldn't call it a tiebreaker. It is like that is the first 5 categories that we measure on, and then capacity is second. That capacity is really a tiebreaker. It's like, if you got these 5, both these 2 individuals, these 2 gals have these 5 tactics. They've got it across the board. One happened to be a GM twice and now wants to go on the ownership side, and one was in a totally different industry. Then we're able to weigh those things against each other and kind of make that call. But there have been many times where we have had the opportunity to hire folks and we're like, you know what, like this just from a culture standpoint does not align. And I've rolled over a few times. In fact, we hired somebody in accounting years ago, where we were pressed. We needed talent. We had to hire it quick. This person had all the talent that we needed and could execute this role. And I told this guy, I was like, look, I'm fine with you hiring them, but I'm telling you they will not be here in a year. I'm telling you, they're not a reach guy. They will not be here in a year. And literally 360 days later, that person left. And he sent me a note. He's like, I hate to show you this email, but this is what you said a year ago. And so it has proven itself over time that really has to be the first way that we evaluate people. And of course, that is references, that is all those such things. But it's different questions than you might ask in an interview of saying, hey, here's a case study of an Excel spreadsheet on evaluating a hotel. Go through all these margins and help us see where you think, one might be off for whatever reason, and then kind of give us your analysis and how you prove it. It's less of those questions. It's a lot more of the softer ones.
Yeah, I'm super interested in this. We have 5 values, and how do you filter hard? Because a lot of the stuff has to be capability as well. Because we got specific roles. How do you filter for those up front?
Okay, so part of it for me is like asking that individual to opt in. And so what I will do is everybody on our team will evaluate that person. Like a lot of companies, it's not just one interview with HR and then you're hired. It is, you're going to interview with the head of every department, and within that department, you're going to interview with every person there. Which is also unusual because you're not oftentimes giving an analyst or an entry-level position the ability to weigh in on somebody who's going to be in their department, because most folks who run a department would feel threatened by that. Instead, it really is a team decision. And so I think what ends up happening is if I interview them and I have one perspective on them, but now 7 others have, right, and they're giving me something very different in terms of feedback, then I'm going, okay, well, maybe I read that wrong. But most oftentimes what happens is now that screen, all of which is consistent across our values, are seeing that in the same way. And now they're going, okay, yeah, I sense that too. Yes, now the last one is usually meeting with me. And when I meet with them, I just give them a sermon. And I say, hey, here are the 5 things that we're about. And I'm not asking you to respond now. But if you line up with this, you will fit here. If you do not, you will not. I promise you. And so it's for those who line up with our values, they're pumped. For those who don't, they're very scared. And they're like, wait. If that's what he's about, or if he's, then particularly some of the values which are a little more soft, they're going, ooh, I don't know if that's a great fit for me. And usually I say, once you've had a chance to think about it, then follow up. And if you think it's a fit, let's go. And a lot of times, I actually, the expectation is they do follow up, and they're saying, hey, just letting you know, I thought about it and I'm all in. If I don't get that, usually it's like, oh, then there we go. Kind of answered it for me. So I don't know if that helps quantify what you're looking for, but that's at least the process that we've usually gone through.
That's so. How long does that take? I'm super curious because this is very. So you're the last interview, and then you do the values thing there, but they're doing the values check all the way around, and it's every head of department. And is this just senior execs, or is this The dishwasher, like how far?
Great question. Well, so let's take accounting, which has 8 people in it and one lead, right? So across our 6 departments, if you will, those individuals will interview, and then within accounting, he will interview, and then those within that team will interview. And sometimes it's 2 or 3 at a time. It can go, because of course, we can't have them for 7 days. But those are the ways that we end up getting the entire team to be able to weigh in and be able to say, here's the things that why we think this person lines up with those values. And inevitably, you're right, you put them through that kind of screen where, again, even if it's 3 people, you're gonna get a consistent view and an authentic view, because it's really hard to fake it when you've gone through that many interviews, especially on multiple occasions, and when we're doing what we do on references, which is obviously a very, very critical part of what we do. But then all of a sudden you can kind of draw out what the talent of that person is and what their character really is. And so, it's questions like, tell me about some of the harder things you've gone through in life. That's not a question you normally have in a finance interview. Like, or some of those types of items are what you can really, dive into. And maybe because we're a private company, we can take a little more liberty with the things that we want to ask and when we're trying to get to know people. But it's not uncommon for me to really have a good sense for what that person is like. What do they like to do when they're not at work? What is their family like? What would their family say about them? Like, some of those types of things are where we can kind of really lean into who someone really is.
Oh, wow. Okay, so how long does this take? Is it 2 days? Is it 3 days?
Well, it's usually intermittent, right? It's like it's different levels of when you pass that. But I would say, our hiring process is definitely slow. From start to finish, I don't know, probably, this sounds worse than it probably takes 2 months, because you're going to have, multiple days of when you are actually, meeting with individuals because you're accommodating schedules. So I would say probably on 4, maybe 5 different interview occasions. And what we try to do is we'll try to have one more social interaction with that individual, to kind of test the water there. So anyway, those are kind of how that's a little bit how we know who somebody really is.
That's amazing. How many people are you total?
Right now, probably 31.
Okay, that totally makes sense. Yeah, so 31.
That's kind of at the operating company level.
That totally makes sense.
Not the hotels, obviously, and those types is very different there. But this is just at the ownership level.
And maybe one last thing, I'm super curious, like reach. Just curious, what is reach?
Well, that's relationships are kind of the first one. We always say relationships inside the company are as important as those outside of the company. I won't go long on that, because generally what happens is people become so customer focused, they don't treat the folks inside the company with the same respect and dignity and kindness that they deserve. Instead, it's like if an investor emails you, the expectations that you get back like immediately. And if so-and-so from this department emails you, the expectations that you're getting back to them immediately. That's just a common dignity that I think we expect out of our teams. So relationships are really kind of the critical component of how we operate. The second one is effort. It's just kind of a blue collar mentality. We talk about this a lot. We kind of have a West Texas heritage with my mom and where she grew up and ranching and all these other things. And so we kind of come into our business with the same mentality, is that, you got to be willing to wash the dishes. You got to be willing to mend the fences. You kind of have to be willing to do the work that anyone would have to do. And so, and by the way, I'm not expecting that. I'm not expecting anybody to do something I'm not willing to do. And so that really is this kind of blue collar mentality. So the E is effort for us. The A is accountability. I'll be honest with you, we were terrible at this when I started with the company. So when we set this up, it was really a aspirational value that we were creating to say we have to lean into this to be able to become this. Otherwise, we're going to be cooked. And so it was eventually after literally years of discipline, of creating quarterly meetings, of having annual reviews, of having monthly marks, of then having weekly meetings where we're driving those quarterly values, that we were able to set up a culture that was really accountability focused. And so now I actually think this is one of our values, but it certainly was not. It was aspirational at first. The fourth one is conviction. Depending how deep you want to get, where I am from a faith standpoint, and like the We believe in a set of values that are unchanging. And I don't expect people to believe what I believe, but I need people to know where I'm coming from so that when I react a certain way or when we act a certain way that may not be consistent with what you might typically do, might be much more gracious, might be much more kind, might be much more focused on finding, a middle ground. That is a different level that's just a different response that people aren't necessarily used to. And so that affects the way we do a lot of things and decisions that we make. And I can kind of give a few examples on that. But conviction is something where it's not like integrity, do the right thing, don't steal money. That's kind of table stakes for any business. For us, it goes a little bit deeper than that. And that's where it does become a lot more about the heart. And the last one is humility. I say this a lot, but I think it's the most important value that we have. It is my dad's, the thing that I think I uphold most about him is his humility. The fact that the projects that we had done, no matter how big they are, no matter how recognized they are, they never defined him. It was never about who he was. It was really about saying, hey, we want people to use their God-given gifts to be able to be excellent at that and leverage that as much as we can so that they feel like, hey, I'm living for purpose and I am right squarely where I'm supposed to be. And I think there's a humility that's required there that we operate in that is modeled after his reputation. So, and the way he ran our business for many years. That's kind of how I think about it.
That's incredible. Thank you so much. That's it's amazing that you've got this sort of heritage in your values, and they're very reflective of kind of who you are.
Yeah, it's important for sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Let's go for the rapid fire, and I just love to get your thoughts. So
yeah, let's do it.
All right. A project you're most proud of?
Mountain Shadows, the one I mentioned earlier in Phoenix, but not because it's been wildly successful. It is 100% because we got a great partner, and I've had a lot of bad partners. Fortunately, most of our partners have been great partners, and this is one of those. This guy, Scott Lyon, that I mentioned earlier. That's kind of what makes it so, I think, fun for me, is having a partner where we are just driving the same goal, totally aligned, always deferring to one another. It's just kind of a fun project that way.
Fantastic. I want to go there now. A lesson that you wish you learned earlier?
Discernment. I think when you're a deal guy and a deal junkie, like that's kind of a phrase we often kick around the real estate business, is you're always looking for the next deal. I think wisdom is an accumulation of scars and wounds. And so it takes a lot of those lessons to learn I shouldn't have done that deal. And there's frankly no way to get there without going through the ones you shouldn't have done. So discernment would be the one I would say there.
I'm very much with you on the scar tissue. The best advice you have for leaders and aspiring leaders?
It's not about you. Leadership is not about you. It is about serving others. It's about lifting. Do not be afraid to lift others up, to promote others, to champion others, for sure.
And what's a sort of tool, like a framework or an idea for other leaders that you might recommend the most? Here's a tip, a trick, a framework.
Ooh, can I go a little deeper on this one?
Yeah.
I would say the wisdom of Scripture is undefeated. I'm sure this audience is going, what the heck is this guy talking about? In some ways, some will probably resonate with me, but the habit of waking up each morning, and in my case, spending time with the Lord, and just in prayer and in meditation and reflection, has completely changed the way that I lead. It's completely changed the way I am as a husband, completely changed the way I am as a father. So however that might apply to your audience who hopefully sees that comment and with some grace and goes, okay, well, how would it apply to me? That's probably what I would say.
Yeah, meditation, very California. Yeah.
That's right.
All right, a business book or idea that shaped your thinking?
Traction, no doubt. I'm not a business book guy. In fact, I don't like most of them. With Traction, I self-implemented parts of EOS early on, and if you're familiar with an entrepreneurial operating system, but that has changed the way that I have operated our company for sure.
It's crazy. I was in Tokyo a few weeks ago. Someone was talking about EOS.
Yes.
Yeah, Small World. I gotta read that book now.
That's the one.
All right, a leadership habit that stood the test of time.
Well, quarterly meetings, right? Like public companies operate on this. There's a reason for that. We just kind of lose grasp of the business over about that period of time. I've seen as we've implemented those now 7 years now, or actually less than that, maybe 5 years now. It's totally changed the way we operate and the way we now have a grasp on what's really going on.
Yeah, we did this. Sorry, just to double click. What's your like? Do you have a deck or do you have like an agenda? Like, how do you?
2 days of meetings, every single department, every single leader, and goal setting every single quarter is kind of how we do it.
Awesome. And last question: one thing that any industry or business can learn from real estate.
I'll say hotels. I'll say it's hotels, but we always say we kind of build places where people want to be. I think any industry should be able to relate to that. Like build a place, build an office, build a team where people want to be, and generally, you'll see better results for it.
Awesome, Dupree. This was amazing. I learned a ton, and I really, really appreciate it. This was super fun.
My pleasure, man. Love being with you. Sure appreciate you including me with and letting me talk to some of your friends.
Thanks so much for listening. If you like this content, please join our LinkedIn group. Please thumbs up, please comment, please subscribe. And we'd love to bring more of this content to you.